If you've ever felt like energy listens to you, like the world responds when you think, feel, or intend, you're not imagining it. Centuries ago, one man wrote a manual exposing the hidden forces behind nature, mind, and influence. They tried to bury it, but today we're opening it. Imagine the sky before we had names for it. No telescopes, no equations, no maps drawn in ink, only fire against the black. One night, a light moves where no light should. A white streak splits the stars. It doesn't blink, it burns. You don't know what it is, only that it wasn't there yesterday, and now it is. You feel it before you understand it. A warning maybe, or a message. Your breath catches, your heart remembers. Something older than language. They called it an omen. The gods were angry, the spirits stirring, a war approaching. Halley's comet came, and sickness followed. Empires collapsed. Babies were born too early. Someone whispered that the sky had opened. But look again, not with fear, with stillness. That same comet returns like clockwork now. Not chaos, not wrath, but orbit. Icy stone pulled along a path older than cities. We name it, we track it, we plot its next arrival like a tide chart. And the fear it once stirred, that was never magic. It was recognition. We just didn't have the words for it yet. So much of what was once feared as supernatural was simply law misunderstood. St. Elmo's fire blue light clinging to the sails of ships, glowing through storms. Sailors fell to their knees, sure they had entered some holy presence or summoned a curse. But it was only the air itself, charged, ionized, releasing light through plasma as storms charged the sky. Not a spirit, not a witch, just a field meeting a threshold. Physics in the language of today, wonder in the language of then, and even that is too neat, because it was holy, wasn't it? It moved people, it shook something inside them. What we call a discharge now was once called visitation. We were never wrong to feel awe, we were only quick to misname it. Cardano knew this. He saw what others feared and called it natural, not to diminish its power, but to honor its structure. He didn't need demons to explain thunder. He didn't need curses to explain illness. He looked for the laws under the pattern, and what he found was not myth, but memory, the body remembering that it belongs to something wider. There was a time when earthquakes meant punishment, volcanoes were mouths of gods, lightning was Zeus casting judgment. But now fault lines shift under pressure. Magma obeys the heat trapped below. Lightning finds the tallest point and completes a circuit. These are not miracles, not fantasies. They are motions, predictable, real, just once hidden. The same goes for the illusions that once broke our trust in our own eyes. A shimmering oasis on a desert horizon. Not magic, not madness, just light bending through heat. A face in the smoke, a message in the shadow. Not lies, but tricks of the angle. All lawful, all explainable, but not less mysterious for it. Because even when we understand it, the feeling doesn't leave. The old awe still hums beneath the surface. Maybe you've felt it, watching the sky just before a storm breaks, hearing your name called when no one's there, sensing something shift in the room before anyone speaks. You weren't wrong. You were simply touching the edge of something our ancestors once called magic, and which we now know as law. The word magic has always been a placeholder, a name we gave to forces we could feel but not measure. Cardano wasn't trying to take wonder away from the world. He was trying to give it back its foundation. He didn't reject the feeling. He rejected the fear. He saw that behind every miracle was emotion, behind every omen, a pattern, and what he offered wasn't a spell, it was a way of seeing. You don't need incantations when you have alignment. You don't need superstition when the laws themselves are more beautiful than any legend. Cardano walked through the world not as one looking for miracles, but as someone listening for patterns. He lived in an age where myths still clung to every unexplained crack in nature, but he didn't reach for gods or demons. He looked deeper beneath the noise of belief, and what he found wasn't sorcery, it was structure. He wasn't alone in that knowing. Centuries before him, Roger Bacon had whispered that all of creation moved by hidden processes, that what we called magic was only the part of nature we hadn't yet named. It wasn't rebellion, it was reverence. Not everything invisible is imaginary. Some things are just subtle. The idea of magia naturalis was born in that space. Not spells, not charms, not invocations, but the quiet art of learning how nature breathes. A rhythm sensed more than seen. Herbs that ease pain, not because a spirit blesses them, but because something in their chemistry speaks to something in ours. Stones that carry weight, not just in the hand, but in the field around it. The stars, not as gods with moods, but as markers of motion, as clocks we haven't yet learned to read. This wasn't the magic of superstition, it was its opposite. The difference mattered. One kind tried to control the world through force, fear, and fantasy. The other asked what the world was already doing and how we might move with it. One tried to bend reality, the other tried to understand it. One shouted at the wind, the other learned how to sail. Cardano stood firmly in the second camp. He believed that every effect had a cause, even if it hid beyond the reach of tools. He didn't see demons in illness. When others looked at a young girl trembling in a crowded street and called her possessed, he looked at the water she drank, the air she breathed, the fear she'd swallowed. He saw symptoms that rose from the body's chemistry, not spirits from another world. And still, he saw how belief worked like a current. He watched people be healed, not by a ritual, but by the certainty that something sacred had touched them. And he didn't mock that, he recognized it. What mattered wasn't the chant, it was the conviction. He saw that healing often followed expectation, that the body, spoken to in its own language, sometimes obeyed belief like it obeys medicine. That quiet observation would echo through time. Mesmer would come with talk of invisible fluids and magnetic force, and still no energy could be measured. When Franklin's commission tested it, they found not magnetism, but imagination. The mind reacting to suggestion, the skin prickling at nothing, and yet something real happened, because the belief itself was a kind of current. Cardano saw it centuries before the rest, that what we think, what we trust, what we're sure of, without knowing why those things shape us, not by spellwork, but through the quiet alchemy of perception meeting physiology. Not magic, not myth, just a law we haven't fully named yet. The way a thought can move matter, the way attention rearranges the unseen. And maybe you've noticed how symbols follow you. A dream that repeats until you finally listen. A number that shows up again and again just when you're about to make a choice. The same animal crossing your path in places it shouldn't be. Not once, but 3 times in a row. You knew it meant something, even if no one else did. You didn't invent that knowing. It came from somewhere older. Jung understood that. He didn't see dreams, astrology, or omens as failed sciences. He saw them as languages, not spoken by the mouth, but by the psyche. Symbols weren't decorations, they were carriers of meaning. Alchemy, with its strange diagrams and impossible metals, wasn't a mistaken chemistry. It was a mirror. It gave shape to inner transformation. The planets didn't make things happen. They marked the readiness in us for something to happen. When the world outside shifted, something inside echoed back. He called it synchronicity, a kind of resonance between inner meaning and outer event, where cause isn't the point. The link isn't mechanical. It's emotional, symbolic. You feel it more than explain it. Like opening a book at the exact sentence you needed, or thinking of someone moments before they call. There's no logic to it, and yet there is order, the kind you sense more than solve. Meaning itself becomes a form of truth, not in the way facts prove, but in the way a song moves you before you know the words. It bypasses argument. It speaks to something buried but awake. Science, in its quiet way, is catching up. We now know that what you think, what you believe, what you expect, shifts the chemistry of your body. Hormones adjust, neurotransmitters follow. The line between thought and matter begins to blur. Focus changes pulse. Fear rewrites immunity. Joy lights up the brain like sunlight on water. Internal states move external outcomes, not by force, but by field. We call it energy now, though we still don't agree on what that means. People say love is energy. Intuition, too. Intention, they're not measured in volts or frequencies, but they leave traces. They change how we speak, how we stand, how we connect. You can walk into a room and feel something shifted, even if no one said a word. These aren't metaphors dressed up as science. They're realities we've lived without needing formulas. Rupert Sheldrake offered a shape for it. He spoke of morphic fields, invisible patterns that, once formed, make repetition more likely. Like once a thing has happened, the field around it remembers, not through memory as we know it, but through resonance. Like tuning forks across time, like a path forming in the forest, simply because someone walked it once. It sounds like ancient magic, and in a way, it is. The same sympathetic resonance once used to explain rituals and spells, now reframed through the language of biology and physics. Not dismissed, repurposed. What was once myth is now emerging pattern. Magic was never a lie. It was a signal that something real was happening, just not in ways we yet understood. What once lived in fire and feathers now lives in brainwaves and field lines, in hormones and heat and heart rate, in coincidence so precise it feels fated. So when you feel a shift you can't name, when a dream opens something you'd buried, when a stranger says what you were just thinking, you weren't mistaken. That was the real thing, not illusion, not imagination, not fantasy, something subtle and lawful moving through you, responding to you, because meaning moves, energy answers, and all the strange symbolic moments you've carried with you, they were never trying to trick you. They were trying to show you that you're already part of a pattern, too intricate to speak, but too familiar to ignore. Watch long enough, and you'll start to see it not just in visions or dreams, but in the shapes the world keeps choosing. A shell that curves like a galaxy, a sunflower turning its face to the sun in perfect spirals, the same arcs echoing in the vaulted ceiling of a cathedral built centuries ago. None of these forms copied one another, and yet they echo, as if some deeper rhythm hums beneath everything that grows, that expands, that reaches for light. Cardano belonged to a tradition that felt this order rather than theorized it, not as superstition, but as recognition. He walked in the lineage of Hermetic scribes, Stoic listeners, and Platonic architects who believed the universe was not random matter scattered by chance, but a kind of mind made visible, a body of intelligence, a living design moved by logos, not just word, but meaning itself, built into the bones of the world. Plato wrote of this in Timaeus when he spoke of the cosmos as a single living being born from thought, not accident, not a god above nature, but spirit within it, and geometry as its expression. To people like Cardano, this wasn't poetic imagery, it was instruction. Numbers were not mere tools for calculation, they were clues. Ratios weren't abstractions, they were evidence. The divine left fingerprints in spirals, in harmony, in structure, and mathematics was the one language quiet enough to read them. He saw what the ancients hinted at, and what Renaissance artists later practiced with discipline. That form isn't placed onto nature, it grows from within it. The golden ratio isn't imposed on the shell, it emerges as the shell grows. The Fibonacci sequence doesn't decorate the sunflower, it directs it. Growth follows rhythm, life follows order, and beauty isn't added, it arises from alignment. Artists knew this, not to decorate, but to reflect. Cathedrals weren't just built to awe, they were shaped to resonate. Their domes and chambers aligned with proportions found in leaves, in bones, in galaxies. They were temples of correspondence, structures that didn't imitate nature, but participated in it. Even the spiral, generated by adding Fibonacci squares again and again, it's not magic, it's simplicity generating complexity, a pattern unfolding because it cannot do otherwise. That same music lives in the heavens. Pythagoras taught that musical intervals followed exact mathematical relationships, that what we hear as harmony is number in motion. He believed the planets moved in this same rhythm, each orbit a note in a larger song. They called it the music of the spheres, and while the language has softened, the structure remains. Today, we find moons caught in perfect orbital resonance, Jupiter's satellites tugging on each other like dancers in time, never breaking rhythm. Look inward, and the same pattern pulses in blood and breath. Tree branches split the same way, lungs divide. Lightning forks the way veins travel. A snowflake forms 6 arms not from whim, but from the shape of the water molecule itself. DNA, that deep, silent script, coils into a double helix, held together by pairings that follow invisible laws. Cells migrate not randomly, but along gradients, like rivers following a slope. What seems soft is secretly shaped. Everything builds by ratio. Everything moves by code. There is no chaos here, only depth. Even the most intricate systems obey these underlying maps. Fractals that repeat across scales, symmetries that hold shape under pressure, structures that return like a phrase half remembered. The physicist Fritjof Capra called it the pattern that connects, and that's what this is. Not a theory, not a metaphor, but a real and quiet binding. Not superstition, law. What you've always felt as beauty, the part of you that quiets in a forest, that stills in front of stained glass, that draws spirals on paper without knowing why it's not taste, it's recognition. Something in you is made of the same rhythm it sees. The shape is already inside you. The mystery isn't how these patterns appear in nature. The mystery is how we ever thought we were separate from them. Your body has always known the truth, even when the mind forgot. The way your lungs expand without instruction, how your pupils dilate in twilight, how your pulse shifts with the moon. These are not isolated functions. They are conversations. The universe moves and the body answers. And not in metaphor, in rhythm, in chemistry, in law. The ancients called it correspondence. As above, so below. Not as poetry, as principle. The shape of the cosmos mirrored in the shape of the human being. The arc of the spine echoing the curve of the sky. The spiraling loops of the inner ear repeating the forms of galaxies. The body was not seen as separate from nature, but as its expression, scaled and carried inward. Microcosm reflecting macrocosm, and through that reflection, remembering its place. Even now, when you look at a newborn child, the proportions whisper this truth. The head, too large. The limbs, slow to catch up. But they do catch up, following scaling laws, older than language. The way blood branches through the body, it follows the same principle a river does. Split, divide, curve, converge. Efficiency written in biology, not through design imposed, but design emerged. Cardano knew the body was not static. It tuned itself. He saw it as instrument, not statue, moved by pattern, entrained by forces around it. Modern science now speaks of this with different terms, but the motion is the same. Your heartbeat slows with music. Your breath syncs with someone across from you. The frequencies around you in sound, in light, even in silence, shape the ones within you. Music therapy isn't decoration. It's medicine that moves through vibration. Sound enters, and suddenly the nervous system begins to shift. Tears rise or sleep deepens. Healing starts not from the mind, but from the return to coherence. Brainwaves, too, are waves for a reason. Meditation softens their speed, reshapes their range. Alpha, theta, delta, not mystical states, but measurable frequencies. You go there all the time without realizing it. When you stare at the sea, when you forget yourself in song. Even machines now speak the language Cardano once intuited. Pulses of magnetism can interrupt depression. Fields can wake memory. Transcranial magnetic stimulation, an invisible force guiding thought from outside the skull. The mind, it seems, is not a sealed container. It listens, which brings us again to fields, not fields of grass, but of pattern. Rupert Sheldrake called them morphogenetic, the forms that shape form. Invisible templates, not coded in genes alone, but remembered in space itself. A limb lost and somehow regrown, not because the body invents, but because it remembers. Cells return not just because of DNA, but because the shape was already waiting. Physics offers its own versions. Electromagnetic fields, quantum fields, spaces that are not empty, but full of instruction. A particle does not decide where to go. It is carried by the field that cradles it. David Bohm described it as enfoldment, that each part of the universe contains all others in folded form. Nothing is separate. Everything touches everything from the inside out. Even in matter's most durable shapes, the pattern repeats. Kepler saw platonic solids in the orbit of planets. Later, we'd find the same geometry in virus shells, in carbon molecules, in structures so small they escape the eye, but not the law. Sacred geometry. They called it not because it was mystical, but because it kept showing up, and always for a reason. These were not whimsical shapes. They were the most efficient, the most stable, the most resonant with the forces that shaped them. The world sings in form, not symbolically, literally. A violin string, a solar orbit, a river's bend, a neural wave, all of them moving to the same principles. Chakra said, the forest is a symphony. Swimi said, DNA is a temple. They weren't being poetic. They were telling the truth, the old way through metaphor that touches what equations still circle around. You are not separate from that music. You are made of it. The breath you took just now, it kept time with something larger. You've always been tuning, adjusting, answering the wider field around you, not through effort, through resonance. Control was never the point. Alignment was. And if all of life moves by resonance, then energy doesn't travel by pressure. It moves by sympathy. Not push, but pull. Not force, but correspondence. That's how you've always felt it, and that's where we go next. Sympathy, in its oldest sense, was never just about feeling for someone. It meant feeling with not through sentiment, but through connection. It meant that things, once touched, stayed connected, even when they appeared apart. It meant that resonance was the real bond, not space, not contact, not force, just tuning. The Stoics had a word for it, sympathia. To them, the cosmos was not a cold machine. It was one living whole, an organism of stars and stones and minds, each part woven into the others by a single thread. Nothing moved alone. When one part changed, the rest adjusted quietly, in kind. It wasn't metaphor, it was law. The Neoplatonists named it anima mundi, the world's soul, a subtle field in which matter and thought were never really separate, mind as pattern, form as expression, everything held within a single unfolding presence, where to affect one thing was, in some quiet way, to affect it all. You've heard this echoed in the Hermetic saying, as above, so below, a phrase often quoted, rarely felt for what it means. Not a riddle, a principle. The pattern of the heavens reflected in the body, in the breath, in the beat of a drum. The same logic that guides a planet's orbit, shaping the spiral in your thumbprint. Correspondence, not as coincidence, as structure. Long before these ideas were reduced to allegory, they were applied. Alchemists paired gold with the sun, silver with the moon, not because it sounded mystical, but because the metal's properties echoed the rhythms of those lights. Weight, color, conductivity, each trait a response to something bigger. Herbalists mapped plants to planets and organs, not by fantasy, but by years of careful noticing. They worked with cycles, with flavors, with temperature and terrain. Their systems weren't modern, but they weren't irrational either. They were attempts to name resonance using the language they had. Even astrology, at its root, was never about fate. It was a mirror, a way of watching how time itself moved through us. The sky didn't cause events. It reflected them the way a body reflects the mind that inhabits it. Archetypes moved through constellations, like seasons through trees. It wasn't meant to predict, it was meant to listen. That same listening shaped Jung's idea of synchronicity, a kind of connection that doesn't move by cause, but by meaning. A moment that arrives just as the inner world is ready to see it. A book falling open to the page you needed. A stranger saying the one word that shifts something you couldn't name. These aren't tricks of chance. They're moments of alignment, emotional resonance without mechanics. Like how a poem moves you, not by logic, but by echoing something already awake inside. And far from myth, modern science is beginning to meet these ideas, where they've always lived in structure, not in fantasy. Take quantum entanglement. Two particles, once linked, remain bound no matter how far apart. Change one, and the other shifts instantly. Not because they send a signal, because they are a signal shared, still humming, in sync. Einstein called it spooky action at a distance, but it's real, and it doesn't fade with space. It echoes something ancient. That contact leaves imprint. That relationship defines behavior. That what was once near is still near, just in a subtler way. You see this too in the simplicity of tuning forks. Strike one, and another nearby begins to sing, not because it was touched, but because it was already tuned. The note finds its match. Resonance doesn't push, it calls. Rupert Sheldrake often returns to this. He reminds us that technology depends on this principle. Radios don't hear every frequency, they hear the one they're tuned to. Brainwave entrainment uses pulses to gently guide internal rhythms. Even television and wireless signals, they would have looked like sorcery once. Now we understand them through fields, through calibration, through sympathy of vibration. It has always been about relationship, not force, not mass, not proximity, but something quieter, the hidden pattern between things, the memory of contact, the echo of likeness. And that same sympathy doesn't just live in particles or circuits. It moves through biology, through breath, through bodies, remembering how to respond to the rhythm around them. You can see it in a petri dish. Long before thought enters the picture, heart cells placed side by side, pulsing out of sync, then slowly matching each other's beat. No nerves between them, no signal sent, just proximity, just connection, and then rhythm, a shared tempo emerging not through command, but through resonance. This isn't metaphor, it's how life behaves when left to its own intelligence. The pattern deepens as you look closer. Circadian rhythms in humans follow the light, even without clocks. Brainwaves shift in predictable phases. Wakefulness and sleep, focus and dream, each with its own frequency, its own signature hum. These aren't isolated circuits, they're layered harmonies, a symphony of entrained systems that whisper to one another through fields and feedback, not with force, but coherence. Rupert Sheldrake once asked what it would mean if memory wasn't only stored in brains or DNA, but also in fields, not just as data, but as presence. He called it morphic resonance, the idea that once a pattern forms in nature, it becomes easier to repeat. That a habit, once established, creates a path in the wider field, one that others can more easily follow. He pointed to animals in labs, rats, learning to run mazes, and found that as the task was mastered in one part of the world, rats elsewhere began to solve it faster. No training, no transfer, just timing. As though knowledge leaves an imprint in the air itself, and the next iteration picks it up without knowing why. This mirrors something ancient, the belief that essence could be passed, not through matter, but through sympathetic touch. That what one thing learns, the world learns with it. That form is not invented each time, but remembered. And there's this strange feeling you've had when someone's eyes are on you from across the room before they speak, before you turn, the flicker in your skin, the alertness that rises. You don't see it, you sense it, and it's not imagination. Sheldrake's research, often dismissed for its implications, found consistent signals. The body responding before the mind is even aware. Inside the body, this language continues. Mirror neurons fire when you see someone move, not just in recognition, but as if rehearsing the same motion. When someone cries and your throat tightens, That's not sympathy in the casual sense. It's physical entrainment, autonomic mimicry. The heart picks up the feeling before the words arrive. In hospitals, caregivers sometimes mirror the vital signs of the people they tend, not as performance, as pattern. Their bodies learning each other's rhythm, breath sinking, nervous systems folding into temporary accord. What once might have been called a sympathy of hearts is now studied in neurology, and still it feels no less mysterious for being mapped. This is what resonance looks like, not theory, experience. The crowd clapping in unison without instruction, strangers laughing at the same moment in a story, a song lifting your mood for no logical reason. These are not accidents, they are alignments. Even science has been here before. Newton's law of gravity was once labeled occult, not because it invoked magic, but because it described action without touch, one body affecting another across space. We've only deepened that mystery. Quantum fields, electromagnetism, the realization that fields, not forces, carry the structure of reality, that particles don't simply move, they respond, that they listen. David Bohm saw it clearly. To him, the universe was not made of parts, but of wholeness. He called it the implicate order, a field in which everything contains the pattern of everything else. Not metaphorically, literally, like a hologram, every shard reflecting the image of the whole, nothing isolated, everything enfolded. Ancient sympathia translated through physics, and still it returns to you. That moment when you just know, the quiet tug in your chest when someone far away is hurting, the way your body stills right before the phone rings. It might be unconscious pattern recognition, it might be bioenergetic resonance, it might be both, but it is real. We feel each other across distances. We sync when we don't mean to. We share pulses and patterns and waves without a word exchanged. Social science has shown that emotional bonds affect heart rates, brain activity, immune response. Even when apart, it's always been like this, like tuning forks in a vast chamber. Instruments, people, planets, sounding together, pulled into alignment by something older than speech. Sympathy was never magic. It was always nature, heard through stillness, a language without grammar, a law without pressure, a hum in the background that everything, even you, already knows how to follow. And if sympathy is how energy moves, not through push, but through likeness, then there's only one place left to look next. The place where your own field begins. The mind, the inner signal that speaks in thoughts, but also in tone. We've been taught to treat thought like vapor, private, fleeting, weightless. But thought has structure. Thought has form. It moves through the brain, not as mystery, but as motion patterns of electricity flowing through circuits of flesh. Neurons firing in rhythm again and again, shaping the way we see, feel, speak, remember. Each flicker of awareness, each image rising behind the eyes is not abstract. It's electrical. It leaves a field behind it. Cardano didn't have machines to see it, but he understood the impulse that mind is not separate from matter, but matter arranged with intention. Now, centuries later, we can measure the signals he sensed. With electrodes placed on the scalp, we read the waveforms of consciousness itself. EEG captures the electric pulses that rise and fall with every thought. MEG detects the magnetic fields. Those pulses generate the silent weather of the mind in motion. When you're calm, the brain pulses slowly alpha waves. When you're alert or anxious, the frequency quickens beta. When you're deep in creativity or meditation, gamma waves begin to rise fast, coherent, synchronized. Your mental state isn't invisible. It has a fingerprint, a shape, a field. Consciousness, at its root, is rhythmic, a beat, a pattern. And when the pattern stops, in deep sleep, in anesthesia, in coma, awareness fades. Not because something disappears, but because the current pauses, as if the light is still there, but the wire's gone quiet. And yet, we are not trapped by our wiring. We can shape it. Long-term meditators change the structure of their waves. Their thoughts move not faster, but more smoothly synchronized regions of the brain firing together like voices in harmony. Loving kindness meditations lift gamma. Focused mindfulness increases alpha. The field becomes coherent. Thought is no longer scattered. It concentrates. Intention carves new rhythms. These changes don't stay in the skull. The body listens. The heart responds to peace. Its electrical field softens. Calm thoughts slow its pace. Prayer, music, stillness, they tune the heart's energy signature, visible in ECG waves. Skin, too, reacts. Tiny changes in conductance show how emotion sweeps across the surface, even before it reaches language.